When a man continuously appears whenever she's in need, a woman starts to harbor feelings for him, unaware that he's her stalker. One day at the beach, Doug carries a bag concealing a camera and tapes his possible prey. However, in the middle of searching, he encounters trouble after a woman expresses her discomfort toward his presence. To avoid the possibility of getting caught, he goes to the park and resumes his operation. Then, Doug comes across a beautiful woman named Amy who happily plays with her dog. Her beauty captivates him, but Doug realizes that she's vulnerable, given that the woman becomes emotional when she sees a couple kissing. This makes her his perfect prey, so he decides to follow her home. The following day, Doug follows Amy as she starts her morning, which leads him to know her favorite coffee shop and her job's location. He wants to be closer to her, so he goes into a store selling covert surveillance equipment. A few days later, Doug intrudes inside Amy's apartment and explores the woman's creative desk, wherein he learns that she's an artist. Doug then heads to her bedroom, and he finds a stack of photographs of Amy with a man. Before he can feel jealous, he sees a breakup guidebook on the table. Focusing on his task at hand, Doug begins installing hidden cameras in every corner of her apartment. Once Amy's home, the woman's unaware that Doug has seen her night routine and even virtually joins her to sleep through his computer. One morning, before heading to Amy's favorite coffee shop, Doug conceals a camera in his shirt and rehearses lines that are related to the movie that she just watched. Doug's plan works because Amy initiates conversing with him after she finds him looking at a movie poster. That night, Amy, who's comfortable with her perceived safety in her room, proceeds to commit intimate acts, much to Doug's delight. The next day, Amy encounters Doug at the cafe, and she strikes up a conversation with him about movies again. She's surprised that he's watched the movie Shampoo Village like she did, which makes her feel thrilled. She begins to think that he's a kindred soul, for he also shares the same opinion about the movie. Out of courtesy, Amy introduces herself to Doug, and afterward, she asks him about his music taste. He informs her that he appreciates various genres, but he shares that he likes a band called Skinny. This surprises Amy because it's her favorite band, and only a few people know them. By the evening, Doug intrudes inside Amy's apartment and gives her dog, Rocky, a treat to tame him. Later on, Amy's back home, and she calls her friend Jen to report her encounter with Doug. She expresses her delight about their commonality, and Jen thinks she should give him a chance. Amy's unsure about it because she hardly knows him, but still, her friend is hopeful for her new romance. After taking a bath, Amy receives a phone call from her colleague Matt, and the man asks her on a date tomorrow night. The woman accepts his invitation as she wants to try dating again. Doug, who's witnessed their whole exchange, becomes enraged. That's why the following day, Doug tries to invite Amy to attend Skinny's band performance later, emphasizing that he secured another ticket for her. Amy finds his actions sweet, but she declines, lying that she has other plans with her family. Hurt by her lies, Doug simply accepts her decision and assures her it's okay. However, when he returns to his car, he screams his frustrations out. Regardless, Doug wants to sabotage her date, so he enters her apartment and injects her drink with medication. As a result of ingesting it, Amy's stomach becomes upset, leading her to throw up. She regretfully contacts Matt to cancel her date, and the man understands her circumstances. Doug, on the other hand, apologizes to her and promises to make things better for her. The next day, Amy finds Doug alone in the parking lot, appearing agitated. Upon checking on him, he lies that his car is broken and the cab he called is yet to arrive. He expresses his nervousness because he has a meeting in 10 minutes, so Amy offers to drive him there. On the road, Amy interviews Doug about his career, and the man informs her that he's a sales representative for a small publishing house. Then, he shares that he also pursues photography, intriguing Amy. She wants to see his works, so Doug tells her that he has a website. With this in mind, Amy voices that she actually wants to have her own website for her paintings. For him to earn her favor, Doug offers to create it, but in exchange, she has to put some of her artwork on CD. Back home, Amy calls Jen to share that she finds Doug to be a nice fellow. Despite this, she hopes she isn't leading him on because she senses something strange about him. Jen advises her to give Doug a chance as she wants her friend to have an option in case her budding relationship with Matt won't work. During Amy's date with Matt, Doug catches them kissing, which which makes him seethe in anger. One day, Doug visits Amy because he has something to show her. To her surprise, Rocky immediately takes a liking to him, but Doug just feigns innocence. When Amy checks the website that Doug's prepared, the woman's grateful to him. He tells her that she doesn't have to pay him, explaining that he actually enjoyed creating the website. Amy's against it because she doesn't want to take advantage of his kindness, but Doug begs to disagree. Since Amy insists on paying him, Doug proposes that she take him to dinner so they're even. At the restaurant, Amy asks Doug if he has family in Los Angeles, and the man reveals that he's actually alone. He explains that his family and friends are in Seattle, and he's only in the area for work. Again, Doug wants to appear that he shares a similar experience with Amy, so he lies that living alone in a different state is his way of moving on from his recent breakup. It works on Amy as she expresses her sympathy toward him, but she refuses to delve into her painful past. Thinking that they formed a stronger bond, Doug places his hand on Amy's, but it only makes her uncomfortable. After their dinner, Amy converses with Jen about Doug, expressing that she finds his hand gross. Jen advises her to ignore him next time, but Amy refuses because she doesn't want to hurt his feelings. Moreover, she wants to focus on her budding romance with Matt, so she thinks it's better off just to make excuses whenever Doug invites her to spend time together. The following morning, Doug executes his little revenge by breaking into her car to steal her belongings. When Amy returns after getting her coffee fix, she begins to drive away, but she panics because her important work equipment is missing. For this reason, the management fires Amy, as she can't deliver the output they require from her. By nighttime, an emotional Amy confides to Jen about her laptop and work materials getting stolen. She's worried because her confidential information might be at risk because of the incident. Not long after, Matt visits Amy to keep her company as he's concerned about her dismissal. The pair share a drink in her living room, and Matt encourages her to pursue her creative endeavors for he sees a bright future for her. Then, with her encouragement, Matt kisses her, but unbeknownst to them, Doug watches their interaction, upsetting him. Before the pair can take it further, Doug calls her phone, which makes Amy reject Matt's advances. Moments later, Amy's away with Jen, so Doug sneaks into Amy's bedroom and applies allergen to her bedsheet. That's why when Amy's sleeping on her bed, she experiences an allergic reaction, leading her to have rashes. The next day, Amy returns home after her checkup, and she applies medication to the rashes that covered her whole body. Then, she calls Matt to inform him that she can't see him in public for a while because of her condition. Matt respects her decision and reassures her that it's out of her control. Still, Amy wants to hang out with him, so she invites him to watch a movie together in her apartment. Afraid that her rashes might be contagious, Matt refuses, reasoning that he'd rather work. Right after, Amy confides in Jen about the possibility of Matt not wanting to pursue her anymore. She believes the constant rejection she gives him might have caused it. Jen thinks that if he can't understand her situation, he's not worth pursuing. Moving on, Jen wonders if Doug has contacted her, but Amy denies it. She's afraid that he's angry at her for pushing him aside. Jen advises her to initiate calling him just to give their connection a chance. The next day, Amy receives a call from Todd Siegel, a 5-star restaurant owner, and the man expresses his interest in her artwork, so he asks if she's available to meet later in the afternoon. Delighted at the opportunity, Amy accepts the offer, but the man encourages her to extend their gratitude to Doug. Later on, Amy meets Doug outside, and he reveals that he's the one who referred her portfolio to Todd. To celebrate her little win, Amy invites him to have dinner with her and Jen tonight. For him to make Amy jealous, Doug refuses, reasoning that he has a date with a woman named Kathy. During dinner, Amy shares with Jen that she feels disappointed that Doug is seeing someone. However, she pleads with Jen to accompany her tomorrow at lunch because Doug will be joining them. She reasons that she doesn't want to be alone with him as it might give him the wrong idea. On the same night, Amy, who'd just gotten home from grocery shopping, stumbles in the kitchen, leading her to get injured from the glass shards. As if on cue, Amy receives a phone call from Doug, and since she needs help, she requests him to visit her. Once he's in her apartment, Doug helps bandage her wound before he takes her to the hospital, much to her gratitude. When the pair returns from the hospital, Doug volunteers to clean the mess, whereas Amy reports to Jen how she acquired the injury. According to her, the shelf in her kitchen fell out when she was away, and because it was dark in her apartment, she stepped into a pile of glass shards. Despite all these, Amy's grateful for Doug because he helped her, which she finds sweet. He overhears their conversation, and he smiles at the compliment he just received. The next day during lunch, Doug is passive in his conversation with Amy and Jen Jen as he wants to be alone with a woman he's fixated with. He can't hide his disdain toward Jen. That's why when the woman jokingly offers more champagne to Amy, he quickly intervenes. This results in him getting soaked with the liquor, leading him to shout in frustration. With awkwardness in the air, Jen apologizes, whereas Amy tries to hand him tissues. Doug refuses, but he assures them that it's okay just to keep himself from making things more awkward. Shortly after, their conversation resumes and Jen asks Doug about what part of Seattle he's from. He reveals that he's from Beacon Hill, which intrigues Jen because her cousin, Mark, is also a resident there. Curious, Jen wonders if he still has his family there, and Doug confirms, particularly his parents. He clarifies that his father is a retiree and is currently away with his mother in Europe. Upon hearing this, Jen and Amy ask about his father's previous profession, but this only puts him in a tight spot. Though he stammers, Doug informs them that he's an eye doctor. Regarding Seattle, Jen asks if he's been to a fashion district called Ridgewood, and the man confirms. However, Doug's uncomfortable with how their conversation's going, so he requests to use Amy's bathroom. Now alone with Amy, Jen reveals to her that Ridgewood is non-existent as she only made it up. Instead of doubting Doug's credibility, Amy advises Jen not to press him for more questions because she doesn't want to make him uncomfortable. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Doug starts to spiral, so in order to leave, he pretends that he received a call from work. He proceeds to leave the bathroom and ensures that the two women can hear that he has to go. Later that evening, Doug calls Amy to clarify that he actually hasn't heard of a place called Ridgewood. In his defense, he just confirmed it because Jen's questions were overwhelming him. Amy expresses sympathy toward him and explains that her friend can be a little rude sometimes. But when Jen returns to her apartment, she's surprised that Amy believes what Doug has shared. Amy voices that she understands his side because Jen keeps on grilling him. For Jen, she's just looking out for her, but Amy's had enough. Following this, Amy takes a bath, so Jen contacts her cousin Mark to confirm if Doug's father really exists. In the middle of the night, a frantic Jen informs Amy that Rocky's missing, alarming her. Amy asks if she's checked the gate, and Jen confirms that her dog isn't there. Out of guilt, Jen volunteers to search for Rocky and advises Amy to remain inside her apartment. At the park, Jen's surprised to find Doug, which makes her question why he's in the area. He lies about just speaking to Amy and says that he wants to help search for Rocky. Jen appreciates his offer, so she orders him to look for Rocky in the other direction. Instead of complying, Doug confronts her for not favoring him, and Jen expresses that she simply doesn't know him. She voices that she knows he isn't from Seattle, compelling Doug to push her down the stairs. By the following hours, a police officer assists a disturbed Amy in returning home after they've discovered Jen's grim fate. At that moment, Doug visits her, which pushes her to cry as she mourns her friend's death. Doug, who's acting clueless about the incident, offers to console her, and she feels guilty for letting her friend search for her dog. Throughout the days that Amy is mourning, Doug keeps her company, which makes her feel conflicted. Until one night, Doug's about to go home, but Amy asks him about his relationship status with Kathy. Doug lies that Kathy ended things between them because he hasn't been giving her attention lately. Amy feels guilty because he's keeping her company, so she apologizes for it. As Amy's asleep, she awakens after hearing a bark outside, prompting her to check if it's her dog. It turns out that Doug allegedly found Rocky, but in reality, it's all part of his plan to gain Amy's affection. Undeniably, Amy's feelings for Doug grow, which leads them to make love. However, in the middle of the deed, Doug has trouble satisfying her, frustrating him. Amy consoles the wounded man, but she begins to regret taking things further. When Doug hears this, he tries to continue their interrupted intimacy. Uncomfortable, Amy pushes him away, reasoning that they made a big mistake. Doug believes that their budding connection isn't, but the woman doesn't have the energy to argue, so she pleads with him to go home. Still, he remains unyielding and even questions if she's choosing to return to her life of being alone. Due to his rising emotions, Doug slips and mentions knowing that Amy performs an intimate act when she's lonely. This catches her off guard because she keeps such sensitive information private. Because of this, Amy searches for a possible camera in her room, and true to her hunch, she finds one installed on her radio. Feeling betrayed, Amy breaks the radio, and there, she sees the camera in the flesh. She tries to rush outside, but Doug prevents her from doing so. Left without a choice, Amy locks herself in the bathroom and tries to exit through the window. Unfortunately, Doug uses his strength to break inside the room and catch her. Now restrained in his arms, Doug shares with her that she looks like the woman woman he loved before, who broke his heart. According to him, the first time he saw her at the park, he felt that they were the same, so he wanted to be closer to her. Regretting his actions, Doug promises to take down all the cameras he installed as long as she won't push him away. Amy uses his vulnerable state to entice him into letting her go, so she expresses that she understands him. To convince him fully, she suggests that she prepare tea for them and talk about Doug's history. As she turns to leave, he stops her, but Amy begins to feel threatened, compelling her to strike his head with a bottle. Once Doug's subdued, Amy continuously strikes his head, only for him to trip her. Mercilessly, he chokes her until she is lifeless. Doug proceeds to uninstall all of the cameras to get rid of the possible evidence against him. A few months later, Doug's still on the loose, and he follows his next prey home.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.